All right. I recorded this video once and there was no sound. Don't ask me why. So I'm sorry if it's filled out, but I'll be sure and give you time to follow along. And if you need to, just stop the video so you can copy. So as we were speaking in the last video, we said that find out what each of the variables are. There's a t and there's an h. So I went up here and I saw that h was height in feet and t is time in seconds. And we're hitting a golf ball. And this is the function that will get the height of the golf ball in seconds. So at 0 seconds, how high is it? At 1 second, how high is it? So it will give the height of the golf ball after t seconds. So calculate the following. I just did like 4 random ones because I don't think we need to do all of them, but I did 4 random ones just for practice so we could practice on the calculator. So h is 0 means wherever I see 0, I need to plug in, wherever I see t, because see how 0 is in the spot where the t is. So everywhere I see t, I need to plug in 0. So negative 16 times 0 squared plus 96 times 0. 0 plus 0, 0. So you don't need a calculator for that one. H of 1 means everywhere I see a t, and you can see 1 is taking the place of t, I need to replace the t with 1. So negative 16 times 1 squared plus 96 times 1. And that's 96 minus 16, because this is 16, or this is 1. Negative 16 times 1 is negative 16 plus 96, which is the same thing as 96 minus 16. So that's 80. Then 2 was the first one I used the calculator on. So this says wherever I see a t, replace it with 2. So negative 16 times 2 squared plus 96 times 2. And I remember from grading the test last semester that one of the things students did is they plugged in for one of the t's and left the other. You would never do that. This means every t in the problem now needs to be 2. 2, 2, 2. And notice how I put that times sign in. Remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally says exponents first, then multiply. This is a step I require on the test. This is called your work step. So make sure you show this step. Then you can go to the calculator. So let's type this in. So negative 16. So use the key at the bottom, negative 16, then your times sign. And this is why I tell everybody to write it out perfectly, because this is how you're going to type it in the calculator. 2, then hit your x squared button, plus 96 times 2, hit enter, and you can see I get 128. And then I skipped and did h of 4 because I wanted to show everyone how you don't have to type it again. If you hit the up arrow, it'll bring back that line and then just change the 2's into a 4 and this 2 into a 4, then hit enter, boom, 128. So think about this. This is what the trajectory looks like. So at 0, the ball's 0, and then it's going to come back down, right? So at 2 seconds, it's 128 feet. But at 4 seconds, it's 128 feet again because it's coming down. Because having the same answer, students go, what? How could that be the same? Because it goes and hits its pinnacle and then it comes back down. So it is possible for it to be 128 feet high 2 different times. Once going up, once coming down. And then we were asked to, I just took the values that we found and filled in the table. So when t is 0, we got the answer 0. So I filled in 0, 0. When t is 1, the height is 80. So t is 1, the height is 80. When t is 2, the height was 128, and then I forgot to fill this one in for some reason. When t is 4, the height is 128 again. So like I said, we don't need all of it because we're not going to graph it. I just want you to understand the whole piece of it. So I'm going to get a blank sheet of paper here. So then I labeled my variables. T, it said up here was, let's see if I can get it all in the picture. Nope, I'm not going to be able to. T is in seconds. H is height in feet. So then when we look here, I wrote that beside the table. T is seconds, time, and H is height in feet. Just so, because they're going to ask me to write sentences about these later, so then I can go, after 1 second, the ball is 80 feet high. After 2 seconds, the golf ball is 128 feet high. So I like my labels here so that when they ask me to write a sentence, then I always know what to put in my sentence, what labels and things. 6 and 0, they give you on the next page, so that was filled in later. So I want you to remember that the x, it's always the value at the top of the t table. So in this case, our x is t, and you can tell because look at the equation. Didn't we say x is always what's inside parentheses? So in this case, they're using t in place of x. So t is our x, h of t is our y. The function notation is always the y. So this is our x, which I'm reminding you is the input. And remember, x is the independent variable. And so this would be our y, which is our output. And it's always the dependent variable. So they want us next to state the depends sentence. So when we do the depends sentence, we say, does the time depend on the height, or does the height depend on the time? And the height of the ball depends how many seconds after it was hit, right? So the time doesn't depend on the height. The height depends on the time. And that's why time is the independent variable and height is the dependent. So the height of the ball depends on the time the ball has been in the air. So I filled that in here. The height of the ball depends on the number of seconds in the air. And then it wants us to know which one's independent. Well, remember how I told you to highlight this? We highlight this, and this tells me what dependent is. Height of the ball depends. So it's the dependent. And we already knew that y, which is the height, is always the dependent variable. So the height of the ball depends. So that's my dependent. That means number of seconds in the air is my independent. So that's what I filled in here. Number of seconds is the independent variable, and height in feet is the dependent, because x is always the independent, y is the dependent. But you do need to be able to write this sentence because they make you do that on the test. So the height depends on the seconds. The seconds do not depend on the height. So if it's 0 seconds, the height of the ball is going to be 0. If it's 1 second later, the height of the ball is going to be 80 feet. What is the input quantity? And this I really wanted to stress because we're going to be doing a lot of word problems coming up. And in word problems, you have to be able to state the variable or input quantity and output quantity. So there's 3 parts whenever you state it. First, you have to tell what letter's being used for it. So what's our x? Input, remember, is our x. What's our x? It's the letter T. And what does it represent? Time. And time in seconds. So every variable statement, that's what this is called, represent your variables, write a variable statement. What's the input quantity has 3 parts. First, tell the reader what letter they're using. Then tell them what that letter stands for, time. And then last, tell them what the units are. So before I uncover the output, see if you can come up with it. What letter are they using for output? H. What does it represent? Height. What's the units? Feet. So H equals height of the ball in feet. And you could either write in feet or put feet in parentheses. Either way, I could have went time and then put parentheses in seconds. So 3 parts for every input quantity, output quantity, or sometimes they'll say represent your variables, write a variable statement. These are variable statements and they always have 3 parts. Letter, what the letter represents, and their units. The letter we're using for Y, what it represents, height, and notice how the letters usually always go together. T is time, H is height, and then that is in feet. That's the third piece, the units. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the second page. So interpret the meaning of H of 4. So the first thing I did was look at the table and see what H of 4 is. H of 4 is 128 because 4 is your X. So I put it in place of X. 128 is your answer, Y. So then I copied down from the other side, X is seconds, Y is feet to help me write my sentence because we do count for full sentences and they do need labels. So 4 seconds after the ball is hit, I think that's what it's called in golf, hitting the golf ball. It is 128 feet high. So something to that extent. You know, in 4 seconds, the ball will be 128 feet high. You just need to make sure you have your seconds, make sure you have your feet, and of course the correct numbers. And then next they ask us what H of 6 equals 0 means. So again, 6 is my seconds. The answer is my height because this is my X, this is my Y. So we would say after 6 seconds, the ball is 0 feet high. But 0 feet high sounds really weird. What would be a better way to say that? 0 feet high means it has come down and hit the ground again. So you should write a sentence that makes sense because we would never say, oh, you're 0 feet high. So 0 feet high means you're on the ground. So after 6 seconds, the ball is back on the ground. And you can see from the table, I wrote that point down. So when they gave me X was 6, the answer was 0, and we would have found it here. We just didn't do all the different problems. But that means 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this would be 6 seconds right here. At 6 seconds, it's back on the ground. So at 0 seconds, it's on the ground because it hasn't been hit. And then again at 6 seconds, it's back on the ground. So we're not going to do the table, but I do want to answer these last 2 questions. Hopefully we have time here. So is the function discrete or continuous? So I wrote that little note there. Remember, when you're looking for which one, you look at the X and ask yourself, can the X be fractions or decimals? So can the X be decimals? That's what you ask yourself. So I go to my table and I say, could I find out how high the ball is after 1.3 seconds? Absolutely. Put 1.3 there. Could I find how high the ball is after 3.8 seconds? Sure. Just put 3.8 there. So decimals make sense. I could do 0.11 seconds. I could do 1.5 seconds, 1.839 seconds. Any decimal makes sense as long as it's between 0 and 6, because 0 is when it's hit, 6 is when it's back down on the ground. So it does have to be in between those 2 numbers. So we say the function is continuous because the input time can be given as any decimal between 0 and